The wind didn't just blow in the Arizona territory, it scoured. It tore through Willow Wilson's hair as she watched her father talk to a man who looked like he'd been stitched together from shadows and cheap whiskey. They were standing by the last of the dying corn, their gestures sharp and secret. Then her father, Edgar Wilson, did something that made her blood turn to ice. He pointed directly at her. At 18, Willow was used to her father's desperate plans. 3 years of drought had boiled their ranch down to dust and bones. But this was different. The stranger's eyes weren't just looking at her. They were weighing her, pricing her like cattle. And the look on his face was pure hunger. Most families had already fled this part of the territory. The Wilson homestead was the last one standing, a monument to a stubbornness that had long ago curdled into foolishness. Their cattle were ghosts, their crops were memories, and their hope was a flickering candle in a hurricane. "Willow!" her father called out. His voice was thick, already blurred by the noon whiskey. "Come over here, girl. Mr. Burrows has a proposition." She moved, but it felt like wading through mud. She wiped her hands on her faded dress, the fabric worn thin as a prayer. Mr. Burrows was a man in his 40s, with teeth the color of old lemons and a suit that cost more than their entire farm was worth. He smelled of stale tobacco and something else, something rotten. "My goodness," Burrows drawled, a sick smile spreading across his face. "Edgar, you failed to mention your daughter was a vision." Her father's chest puffed out. It was a pathetic sight. "Willow's a good girl," he slurred. "Hard worker, worth every penny. Every penny." The words weren't just words, they were stones. They hit her, one by one, and the terrible truth began to build itself inside her chest. Her father wasn't selling land. He wasn't getting a loan. "Father," she said, her voice a dry whisper. "What is this about?" Edgar Wilson couldn't meet her gaze. He stared at a crack in the parched earth instead. "Mr. Burrows, he owns the Silver Creek Mining Company. He needs a housekeeper in town." "A companion," Burrows added, his smile widening. "For a select clientele." The world tilted. The cruel blue sky, the dusty ground, the man with the yellow teeth. It all spun into a single horrifying picture. "You're selling me," she said. It wasn't a question. "You're selling me to a brothel keeper." "Now, Willow," her father sputtered, finally looking at her. His eyes were weak, pleading. "It's respectable work. I've already agreed." $500, Burrows cut in, smooth as poison. A generous offer considering. $500. The price of a life. The price of a soul. Her world wasn't just tilting anymore. It was shattering. "I'm not going," she said, her voice shaking but firm. Her father's face darkened into a familiar, ugly mask of anger. "You'll do as you're told. This farm is dying. We're dying." "No," she said, taking a step back. "I won't." Burrows let out a theatrical sigh. "Edgar, control your daughter. We had a deal." But his words were cut off, sliced in two by a new sound. Hoofbeats, steady, rhythmic, coming closer. All three of them turned toward the dusty road. A lone rider was approaching, his silhouette a dark promise against the glaring sun. Willow knew that shape. She knew that rider. And against all reason, her heart didn't just beat. It hammered. Adam Morgan swung down from his horse with an easy grace that spoke of a life lived in the saddle. At 23, he was already a legend in the territory, the heir to the sprawling Morgan ranch that bordered their own patch of misery. For the past year, he'd been a quiet presence in her life, helping with repairs her father was too drunk to handle, his kindness a silent question she never dared to answer. "Afternoon," Adam said, his voice calm. But his eyes, sharp as a hawk's, missed nothing. They swept over the scene. Her father's drunken posture, Burroughs's predatory smirk, the terror on her own face. His gaze lingered on her for a moment longer than it should have. "Everything all right here, Willow?" Before she could find her voice, her father stumbled forward. "This is private business, Morgan. You best ride on." Adam's gaze shifted to Burroughs. Recognition, cold and hard, dawned on his face. "Silver Creek Burroughs. I thought they ran you out of 3 counties already." Burroughs sneered. "My reputation precedes me." "Like gangrene precedes amputation," Adam replied, his voice dangerously even. "What business do you have with the Wilsons?" "Mr. Burroughs," her father puffed up, "is offering good money for Willow's services." The silence that followed was absolute. Willow could hear the blood pounding in her ears. Adam's expression didn't just darken, it became something carved from stone. He looked from her father to Burroughs, and then finally, his eyes locked on hers. He saw the unshed tears. He saw everything. "You're selling your daughter." The disgust in his voice was so profound, it made her father physically shrink. "An employment opportunity," Burroughs said smoothly. "That benefits everyone." Adam didn't reply. Instead, he took 2 steps forward, placing himself between Willow and the other 2 men. His shoulder was a solid wall in front of her. And then he said the words that changed everything. "She already belongs to me." The declaration hung in the air, electric and impossible. Willow stared at the back of his shirt, her breath caught in her throat. She couldn't move. She couldn't think. "What nonsense is this?" her father sputtered. Adam didn't look at him. He turned his head just enough to meet Willow's shocked gaze, and the hardness in his eyes softened into something she didn't dare name. "I've been meaning to speak with you, Mr. Wilson," Adam said, his voice carrying across the dry yard. "Willow and I have been courting. I came here today to ask for her hand in marriage. It was a lie, a beautiful, terrible, breathtaking lie. They had never spoken of courtship. He had been kind, yes. He'd fixed her well, brought them supplies, taught her to shoot when coyotes got too bold. But marriage? That was a fantasy she kept locked in the deepest, most secret part of her heart. "Is this true?" her father demanded, his suspicious eyes boring into her. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. What could she say? Then she felt it. Adam's hand found hers, his grip warm and steady. It was an anchor in the storm. "Tell him, Willow," Adam said, his voice a low command. "Tell your father who you belong with." The choice was laid bare. A life of shame with Burroughs, or a life built on a lie with Adam. It wasn't a choice at all. Her fingers tightened around his. "It's true," she said, the lie tasting like salvation on her tongue. "Adam and we've been courting. I was going to tell you, father." Burroughs spat on the ground. "This is ridiculous. We had a deal, Edgar." "I made no deal with you," Adam said, his voice like cold steel. His eyes never left Burroughs. "And a father can't sell what isn't his to give. Willow made her choice. She belongs with me now." Her father looked from the money in Burroughs' pocket to the unyielding man standing before him. The Morgan family was the most powerful in the territory. It was a fight he couldn't win. "I was promised $500, he whined. Adam didn't even blink. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a $20 bill, and pressed it into Edgar's hand. "Here's a down payment on a proper bride price. I'll be back tomorrow to discuss terms with a sober man, not one who'd sell his own blood." He then turned his full attention back to Burroughs. The friendly rancher was gone. In his place was someone else, someone colder, harder. "If I ever see you on this property again," Adam said, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper, "they'll find pieces of you scattered from here to Mexico. Are we clear?" Burroughs measured the look in Adam's eyes. He saw the promise of violence there, stark and real. Plenty of other girls, he muttered, backing away toward his horse. No need for complications. He mounted up and rode away, but not before casting one last, hateful look at Willow. A look that promised this wasn't over. As the dust settled, the tension drained out of Willow, leaving her weak-kneed. Adam still held her hand. "Father," she said, "I'd like to speak with Adam, alone." Edgar scowled, pocketing the $20. "Fine, but this isn't over." He stumbled back toward the house, a storm of resentment and whiskey. When they were finally alone, Willow pulled her hand from Adam's. "Why?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why did you do that?" His eyes, the color of a winter sky, held hers. "You know why." "No," she insisted, though her heart was screaming yes. "We're not courting. We've never even—" "Willow." The way he said her name was like a prayer. "I've been finding excuses to ride to this farm every week for a year. I fixed your fence when it didn't need fixing. I brought you books you didn't need. I taught you to shoot when you're already a better shot than me." Comprehension dawned, slow and staggering. "You've been courting me?" A small smile touched his lips. "I thought I was being obvious. I was waiting for the right moment. This wasn't it." His expression grew serious again. "But when I saw what was happening, I couldn't wait any longer. I meant what I said, Willow. I want to marry you, if you'll have me." The world spun again, but this time it was from hope, not horror. Adam Morgan wanted her, not out of pity, not as a rescue. "This is madness," she whispered. "We barely know each other." "I know you read Shakespeare by lamplight," he said, his voice soft. "I know you can't abide coffee without honey. I know you sing to the chickens when you think no one is listening. I know you're the strongest person I've ever met." Each word was a key, unlocking doors she'd kept bolted shut for years. He saw her. He truly saw her. "And my father, the farm. Your father can sober up and work his land, or he can sell it. Either way, you are free, Willow. You can choose your own path." Freedom. It was a terrifying, beautiful word. "And if my path leads to you—" His eyes darkened with an emotion so powerful it stole her breath. "Then I'll be the happiest man in this territory." She should have said no. She should have thought it over. But the truth was afire in her blood. "Yes," she said. It was the easiest word she'd ever spoken. "Yes, Adam Morgan, I'll marry you." He closed the distance between them, his hand cupping her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. "May I?" he whispered. She nodded, and his lips met hers. It was a kiss that tasted of dust and desperation and a hope so fierce it felt like a promise. When he pulled away, he rested his forehead against hers. "I should have done that a year ago." "What happens now?" she asked, her voice breathy. "Now," he said, glancing toward the ramshackle house, "I take you home to meet my family. And if your father refuses his blessing tomorrow—" His jaw tightened. "It doesn't matter. You're 18, Willow. I'm making you my wife before the month is out." He lifted her onto his horse, then swung up behind her, his arms a solid wall around her. As they rode away from the farm that had been her prison, she leaned back against him, feeling the steady beat of his heart. It felt like a drum, calling her toward a new life. But as the sun began to set, casting long, bloody shadows across the land, Adam leaned close, his voice a low rumble in her ear. "Willow," he said, his tone suddenly grim, "there's something you need to know. What happened today, it wasn't just about Burroughs, or your father." She tensed, her newfound hope turning cold. "What do you mean?" He was silent for a long moment, the only sound the steady plod of the horse's hooves. "Burroughs works for a man named Silas Blackwood," he said finally. And Blackwood doesn't just want your land. He wants to destroy my family. By saving you, I might have just started a war. The Morgan Ranch was a different world. It wasn't just surviving the drought, it was defying it. Green pastures, fat cattle, a two-story ranch house that gleamed white in the setting sun. It was a kingdom carved out of the wilderness. It's beautiful, Willow breathed as they rode down the long, winding path. My grandfather built it, Adam said, his voice close to her ear. It's home. As they neared the house, a woman stepped out onto the porch, wiping her hands on an apron. She was handsome, in her 50s, with dark hair streaked with silver and an air of quiet authority. Her smile was warm until she saw Willow. Then it became cautious. Adam, she called. You have company. Mother, Adam said, helping Willow down from the horse. His hand rested on the small of her back, a simple, possessive gesture that sent a shiver through her. This is Willow Wilson. Edgar Wilson's daughter, Hannah Morgan said. It wasn't a question. Understanding and something else, pity maybe, dawned on her face. Adam has spoken of you, she said, her voice kind but her eyes sharp. Come inside, dear. You must be starving. The house was a revelation. Polished wood floors, paintings on the walls, a sense of permanence and care that was the exact opposite of the patched-together misery of her own home. After being shown to a small washroom with soap that smelled of lavender, Willow stared at her reflection. A farmer's daughter. Face tanned, eyes shadowed, hair a tangled mess. What was she doing here? Was Adam Morgan really going to marry her? The memory of his kiss was the only thing that made it feel real. When she entered the dining room, a tall, gray-haired man rose to his feet. He had the same intense blue eyes as his son. Miss Wilson, George Morgan said, his voice a low rumble. Adam tells me you've agreed to join our family. The directness of it stunned her. Adam had already told them everything. It's all happened rather suddenly, she managed to say. Indeed, George replied, his expression unreadable. Unconventional, even for my son. Over a dinner of roast beef and apple pie, luxuries she hadn't tasted in years, the story came out. Adam explained the situation with Burroughs, his voice tight with controlled anger. When he finished, George Morgan set down his fork and looked at Willow, his gaze piercing. Let me be plain, Miss Wilson. I've known your father a long time. What he attempted today was unconscionable. But hasty marriages are built on weak foundations. Are you marrying my son to escape your father, or do you truly have feelings for him? The question was a blade, sharp and direct. There was no room for lies. Mr. Morgan, she began, her voice shaking slightly. I won't pretend my situation didn't influence my decision, but your son has shown me more kindness in the last year than I've known in my entire life. I admire him, and I believe that admiration can grow into what it needs to be. Her honesty seemed to satisfy him. His stern expression softened. Well said. But there's more you need to know, George continued, his voice dropping. This isn't just about a drunken fool and a brothel keeper. Silver Creek Burroughs is a puppet. The man pulling his strings is Silas Blackwood. The name hung in the air like smoke. Blackwood has been trying to buy up this entire valley for years, George explained. He uses drought, debt, intimidation, anything he can. He wants our ranch most of all. We have the best water rights. And your farm, Willow, Adam added, his hand finding hers under the table. It sits right between our land and the river. It's the last piece Blackwood needs to choke us off completely. Suddenly the picture grew larger and much, much darker. This wasn't a simple rescue. It was a move in a high-stakes game. A war, just as Adam had said. Blackwood thought he could get your father to sell cheap, George said. When that didn't work, he sent Burroughs to remove you from the equation. figuring your father would fall apart and sell for pennies on the dollar. So, by proposing to me, Willow said, the pieces clicking into place with sickening speed, you've blocked him. For now, Adam said. It makes the Wilson land part of the Morgan Ranch, in effect. He can't touch it without declaring open war on us. The warmth of the dining room suddenly felt cold. The apple pie sat like a stone in her stomach. She looked from George's grim face to Hannah's worried one, to Adam's determined jaw. This wasn't a fairy tale. She hadn't been saved by a handsome prince. She had just become a pawn in a battle for an empire. And Silas Blackwood was not a man who liked to lose. As they made plans for Adam to return the next day with a formal bride price, a horrifying thought occurred to Willow. Why is he so desperate for my father's land? She asked. It's barely worth anything. The well is almost dry. George and Adam exchanged a look that told her there was another secret, another layer to this deadly game. We don't know for sure, George said slowly. But my father always believed there was something more to that patch of ground. Your mother, she knew the land better than anyone. Before she passed, she was surveying for a new well. She thought she'd found a source of water no one else knew about. An underground spring, a secret aquifer. In a land dying of thirst, such a thing wasn't just valuable, it was priceless. It was worth killing for. And Willow realized, with a chilling certainty, that Blackwood wasn't just after the land. He was after something hidden beneath it. Something her mother might have died to protect. That night, sleeping in a soft bed in the Morgan guest room, Willow didn't dream of her upcoming wedding. She dreamt of dark water, deep beneath the earth, and the shadowy figure of a man who would stop at nothing to possess it. The next morning, Willow rode back to her father's farm with Adam. She wore a simple blue dress Hannah had given her, a loan that felt like a uniform. She was a Morgan soldier now. Adam carried a formal document drawn up by his father, offering $800 for her hand, enough money to ensure her father wouldn't make a deal with Blackwood out of desperation. They found Edgar on the porch, a rifle across his knees, but something was different. The whiskey bottle was gone. He looked haggard but sober. You came back, he said, his voice raw. I told you I would, Adam replied, dismounting. He laid out the terms, respectful but firm. The money, the Morgan protection, the promise of a new start for Edgar if he could stay off the bottle. To Willow's astonishment, her father didn't argue. He just listened, his face a mask of shame. I have conditions, he said finally. A proper church wedding. Your word you'll treat her as an equal. And visiting rights. She's all I have left of her mother. The requests were so reasonable, so full of a fatherly concern he hadn't shown in years, that it brought tears to Willow's eyes. They signed the agreement right there on the rickety porch table. Her life signed away in ink. I need to get some of my things, she said, needing to escape the intensity of the moment. My mother's locket, my books. Go on, Edgar said, his voice thick. As she entered the dusty, familiar squalor of the house, Adam's voice followed her. Mr. Wilson, he said, there's one more thing. Why does Silas Blackwood want this land so badly? Edgar was silent for a long moment. You're better off not knowing, boy. That's not good enough, Adam pressed. Willow paused in the doorway of her small room, listening. My wife, Clara, Edgar said, his voice cracking. She kept journals about everything, the weather, the crops, the water. She was convinced there was an underground river beneath this house. She drew maps. Willow's blood ran cold. Maps. Where are they? Adam demanded. I burned them, Edgar said, his voice flat. After she died, I was drunk, grieving. I thought they were just mad ramblings. I burned everything. Willow's heart sank. The proof, the one thing that could explain all of this, was gone, turned to ash. She hurried into her room, her hands shaking. She gathered her few possessions, a change of clothes, her mother's silver locket. She reached for the 3 books she kept on a small shelf, her only escape from this dusty prison. As she picked up the last one, a worn copy of Shakespeare, she felt something slide from between the pages. It was a small folded piece of paper, brittle with age. Her hands trembling, she unfolded it. It wasn't a letter. It was a map, a hand-drawn map of their property, covered in her mother's elegant script and strange symbols. And in the corner, a single, chilling note. He knows. He killed Jacob for it. He'll kill for it again. Trust no one but Adam's father. Jacob. That was Adam's uncle. He died years ago in a hunting accident. An accident no one ever fully believed. And the man her mother was warning her about, the he in the note, it could only be one person. Silas Blackwood. She stood there, frozen, the map clutched in her hand. Her father hadn't burned everything. Her mother had hidden the most important piece of the puzzle, right where she knew Willow would one day find it. This wasn't just about water anymore. It was about murder. And her mother had known it all along. When she walked back out onto the porch, the map hidden in her pocket, the world looked different. Sharper, more dangerous. Adam and her father were standing in a tense silence. "Ready?" Adam asked, his eyes searching her face. She couldn't speak. She could only nod. As they rode away, she didn't look back. She was no longer just a pawn in this game. She was a player. She held the map. She held the secret. And she was riding straight into the heart of a war she was just beginning to understand. But the note from her mother echoed in her mind. Trust no one but Adam's father. Why not Adam? Why only George? What did her mother know about the Morgan family that she wasn't saying? The secret she held wasn't just a map. It was a seed of doubt, planted in the very foundation of her rescue. Back at the Morgan ranch, the news of the successful agreement was met with grim satisfaction. A wedding was set for the following Saturday. 1 week. It felt like a lifetime, and no time at all. Willow couldn't bring herself to show anyone the map, not yet. Her mother's warning, trust no one but Adam's father, was a ghost at her shoulder. Why the distinction? What secret was coiled at the heart of the Morgan family itself? She spent the next few days in a haze, learning the rhythms of the prosperous ranch from Hannah, who treated her with a kindness that was both comforting and unsettling. Was this genuine affection, or was she just a valuable asset being polished for her new role? The doubt was a poison, tainting everything. It cooled her interactions with Adam, creating a distance he couldn't understand. "What is it, Willow?" he asked one evening as they walked by the creek, the only time they had alone. "You seem far away." "It's all happening so fast," she lied, the secret map feeling like a hot coal in her pocket. He stopped and took her hands. "I know, but this is real. What I feel for you is real." His sincerity was a torment. Did he know about his uncle? Did he know the full, bloody history that connected their families? Or was he too a pawn in his father's game? The next day, they rode to the town of Copper Springs to make arrangements. It was a bustling, orderly town, a world away from the desolation of her father's farm. As Adams intended, Willow was an object of intense curiosity. Whispers followed them from the general store to the church. Adam was protective, his hand always on her back, a silent claim that both thrilled and terrified her. At the jeweler's shop, he bought her a simple gold wedding band. Then, he surprised her with another gift. A delicate gold pendant, a single star with a tiny diamond at its heart. "A star to guide you home," he said softly, fastening it around her neck. The gesture was so tender, so genuine, it almost broke her resolve. She wanted to believe in this man, in this future. But her mother's warning held her back. Later that afternoon, seeking a moment alone, Willow excused herself and made her way to the town records office. On a hunch, she asked to see the file on the death of Jacob Morgan. The clerk, a dusty old man with ink-stained fingers, found the folio. It was thin. The cause of death was listed as a gunshot wound from a hunting rifle. Accidental. Case closed. But tucked inside was a witness statement she didn't expect. The man who found the body, the man who reported the accident, was Edgar Wilson, her father. Willow felt the floor drop out from under her. Her father was there. Why had he never said anything? The note said, "Blackwood killed Jacob." Did her father witness it? Was this the secret Blackwood was holding over him? Was this why he drank? This changed everything. Her father wasn't just a drunk. He was a man trapped in a terrible secret, a secret that put him at the center of a murder. She left the records office in a daze and nearly collided with a man on the boardwalk. It was Silver Creek Burrows. His yellow-toothed smile was a slash of ugliness. "Well, well, the runaway bride, enjoying your new life." "Stay away from me," Willow said, her voice low and trembling. He leaned in closer, his voice a greasy whisper. "A word of advice. Some family trees have roots that are rotten to the core. The Morgans, for instance. You ask your pretty fiancé what really happened to his Uncle Jacob. Or better yet, ask his father." He tipped his hat and sauntered away, leaving Willow frozen on the boardwalk, his poisonous words echoing in her ears. He was trying to turn her against them. But why mention George specifically? It mirrored her mother's warning. That night, Willow couldn't sleep. The pieces were all there, but they formed a picture she couldn't bear to look at. Her father, a witness to a murder. Her fiancé's family, the victim. And a warning that pointed directly at the patriarch, George Morgan. She had to know the truth before she tied her life to this family forever. Taking a candle, she slipped out of her room and made her way to the study where George kept the ranch ledgers. She didn't know what she was looking for. A letter, a journal, anything. The room was dark and silent, the air thick with the smell of leather and old paper. She moved to the large oak desk, carefully opening drawers. Ledgers, deeds, contracts. Nothing. Then she saw it. A small, locked strongbox tucked away on a bottom shelf. Using a letter opener from the desk, she worked at the simple lock, her heart hammering against her ribs. It sprang open with a soft click. Inside was a stack of yellowed letters. The handwriting was her mother's. They were love letters. Addressed not to her father, Edgar, but to George Morgan. Willow sank to the floor, the letters spilling from her hands. Her mother and George Morgan had been in love. A secret, passionate affair that had lasted for years. The last letter was dated a week before Jacob Morgan's death. "George, my love," it read. "Edgar knows. He confronted me. He was drunk, insane with jealousy. He said he would kill Jacob to make you suffer as he has. I'm so afraid. He has his hunting rifle. He's gone out looking for him." The world dissolved into a roaring blackness. It wasn't Blackwood who killed Jacob. It was her father. In a jealous rage over my mother's affair with George. And George had known. He must have known. He'd kept these letters, buried the truth for years to protect his family's name, to protect the woman he loved. Her rescue wasn't a rescue. It was a transaction. George was buying her, marrying her to his son, binding the Wilson land and its secrets to his family forever. Adam's love might be real, but the foundation of their marriage was a lie, built on the blood of his own uncle. Suddenly, she heard a floorboard creak in the hallway. She scrambled to her feet, shoving the letters back into the box just as the study door swung open. It was Adam. His face was a mask of confusion, then suspicion, as he saw the open strongbox on the floor. "Willow," he asked, his voice tight. "What are you doing?" She couldn't speak. She could only stare at him, the terrible truth a gaping chasm between them. He was the son of one of her mother's lovers, and she was the daughter of the other, the daughter of a murderer. His eyes dropped to the open box, then back to her face, and in that moment, he knew. He didn't know the details, but he knew she had discovered the secret that lay rotting at the heart of both their families. The love in his eyes died, replaced by a look of cold, devastating betrayal. The silence in the study was a living thing, heavy and suffocating. Adam took a step into the room, his eyes locked on the open strongbox, then on Willow's pale, terrified face. "What did you find?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Willow couldn't form the words. She just shook her head, the letters feeling like poison in her hands. He strode past her, knelt, and pulled a letter from the box. He recognized the handwriting instantly. He'd seen it on notes his mother had kept, notes from her dear friend, Clara Wilson. But this was no friendly note. He read the damning words, his face growing paler with each line. "Edgar knows. He said he would kill Jacob." He looked up at Willow, and the man she was falling in love with was gone. In his place was a stranger, his eyes filled with a grief and rage that was 20 years old. "Your father," he whispered, the words like shards of glass. "He killed my uncle." "I didn't know," Willow choked out. "Adam, I just found them." "You came into my home," he said, rising to his feet, the letter trembling in his hand. "You accepted my proposal. You let my mother welcome you, my father protect you. All while knowing your father was a murderer." "No, that's not how it was." But he wasn't listening. The betrayal was too deep. This whole thing, the rescue, the engagement, it was all a lie, wasn't it? A way to get close, to make sure this secret stayed buried. Before she could answer, the door opened again. George Morgan stood there, his face grim. He had heard their raised voices. His gaze fell on the letters in his son's hand, and all the strength seemed to go out of him. "So," he said, his voice heavy with resignation, "the ghosts have finally come home." "You knew," Adam said, turning on his father. "All these years, you knew it was Edgar Wilson, and you did nothing. You let us think it was an accident." "It was to protect Clara," George's voice boomed in the small room. "Your mother, to protect this family from a scandal that would have destroyed us. Edgar was a jealous drunk. Putting him on trial would have meant revealing the affair. I couldn't do that to your mother. I couldn't do it to Willow's." The confession hung in the air, ugly and raw. He had chosen silence over justice. "And now," Adam demanded, "what about now? You were going to let me marry the daughter of the man who murdered your brother." "The marriage secures the land," George shot back. "It binds the secret to our family. It was the only way to ensure it never came out." Willow felt sick. He was admitting it. She was nothing more than a contract, a way to seal a tomb of secrets. This had never been about her. It had always been about the land, the affair, the murder. "Get out," Adam said, his voice flat and dead. He wasn't looking at his father. He was looking at Willow. "Get out of my house." "Adam, please," she begged, tears streaming down her face. "Let me explain." "There's nothing to explain," he said, his face a mask of stone. "My uncle is dead because of your father's jealousy, and my life, my entire family, is built on a lie you are a part of. Now get out." He turned his back on her. It was a final, brutal dismissal. Heartbroken and humiliated, Willow fled. She ran from the study, from the house, from the family that had offered her a dream and shown her a nightmare. She stumbled into the night, not knowing where she was going, only that she couldn't stay. She made it to the stables, her mind reeling. She had to get away. But where could she go? Back to her father, the murderer. As she fumbled to saddle a horse, a hand fell on her shoulder. She spun around, a scream catching in her throat. It was Hannah Morgan. Her face was etched with sorrow. "Don't go," she said softly. "The men are blind with anger and old grief. They aren't thinking clearly." "He told me to leave," Willow sobbed. "He hates me." "He loves you," Hannah corrected gently. "That's why he's in so much pain." "Willow, I knew about the letters. George told me years ago. It was a terrible secret, and we made a terrible choice to keep it. But we did it to protect our families, to protect you, a child who had done nothing wrong." Willow stared at her, confused. "But Adam... Adam will see the truth once his anger cools," Hannah said. "He will see you are not your father. But right now, you are not safe here, and you are not safe at your father's farm. There is only one thing to do." "What?" "You must expose the truth," Hannah said, her eyes glinting with a fierce intelligence Willow had never seen before. "All of it. But not just our secrets. Blackwood's too." She then revealed the final missing piece of the puzzle. "George didn't just stay silent to prevent a scandal," Hannah whispered. "Silas Blackwood was there that day. He saw what Edgar did. He's been blackmailing us, and your father, for 20 years. He's used that secret to control this valley, to ruin men, to build his empire on our silence and our shame." It all clicked into place, the power Blackwood held, her father's drinking, George's desperation to acquire the Wilson land. It was all a web of blackmail, stretching back decades. "Blackwood knows you've discovered the secret," Hannah said urgently. "Burroughs reporting back to him is the only explanation. He will not let you or your father live to tell it. He will use this chaos to destroy both our families once and for all." "What do I do?" Willow asked, her fear being burned away by a new, cold anger. "There is a U.S. Marshal in the next county," Hannah said, pressing a small bag of coins and a piece of paper into Willow's hand. "His name is Frank Garrett. He's the only man in this territory Blackwood can't buy. This note from me will get you an audience. Ride now, ride fast, and do not stop for anyone." Hannah helped her finish saddling the horse. "Go, child. Be the justice this valley has been denied for 20 years. As Willow galloped out of the Morgan ranch, leaving behind the man she loved and the ruins of their future, she knew this was no longer about a wedding or a piece of land. This was about redemption. She held the secret map in one hand and the marshal's name in the other. It was a desperate, suicidal mission. She was one girl against the most powerful, ruthless man in the territory. But Hannah's words echoed in her heart. Be the justice. She spurred the horse onward, the wind whipping tears from her eyes. She wasn't just riding away from her past. She was riding to war. The ride was a nightmare of shadows and fear. Every rustle in the brush, every coyote's howl, sounded like Blackwood's men. Willow rode for hours, pushing the horse, pushing herself, guided only by the moon and the desperate hope that Marshal Garrett was the man Hannah claimed him to be. She reached the town of Silver Creek just after dawn, a grimy, soot-choked mining town that was the heart of Blackwood's empire. The marshal's office was a small, unassuming building, but it felt like the only solid thing in a town built on corruption. Marshal Frank Garrett was a hard man, his face a road map of old fights and long nights. He looked at Willow, her fine dress covered in dust, her eyes wide with terror and determination, and he listened. She told him everything: the attempted sale, the forced engagement, the letters, the murder, the blackmail. She laid out the whole ugly, tangled story, her voice shaking but never breaking. When she was done, she slid the map her mother had drawn across his desk. Garrett studied the map, then the story in her eyes. "This is a tall tale, Miss Wilson," he said. his voice flat. "Accusing Silas Blackwood of murder and blackmail. That's like accusing the sun of rising. Everyone suspects it, but no one can prove it. All you have is the word of a dead woman and a drunken father." "And you have this," Willow said, her anger flaring. "You have a chance to break his hold on this valley. Or are you like all the rest? Are you afraid of him?" A flicker of something, respect maybe, showed in the marshal's eyes. "I'm not afraid of any man," he said slowly. "But I don't go to war without an army. I'll need more proof. I'll need your father's testimony." "Blackwood will kill him before he can speak," Willow said. "Then we need to get to him first," Garrett replied, standing up and strapping on his gun belt. "And we need to get the Morgans. If Blackwood is making a move, he'll hit them first." He deputized 2 men from his office, tough, quiet miners who looked like they feared nothing. They rode out of Silver Creek at a gallop, a tiny force against an empire of greed. But they were too late. As they crested the ridge overlooking the Wilson farm, they saw the smoke. Thick, black plumes rising into the clear morning sky. The farmhouse was on fire. "No!" Willow screamed, spurring her horse into a reckless, desperate charge down the hill, the marshal and his men right behind her. They found her father near the barn, a bloody gash on his head but still alive. He'd been knocked unconscious before the fire was set. "They came for the maps," Edgar croaked, his voice raspy from smoke. "Burroughs and his men. I told them I burned everything. They didn't believe me." He looked at the burning ruin of his home. "They took nothing, because there was nothing left to take." He didn't know his daughter held the one thing they were looking for. "Where did they go?" the marshal demanded. "Said they were going to finish things," Edgar whispered, his eyes wide with a sober man's terror. "At the Morgan Ranch. They were riding into a trap. Blackwood wasn't just trying to silence them, he was trying to wipe them out. All of them. He'd used the chaos of the revealed secret to make his final move." "My son," Garrett said to one of his deputies, "ride to Fort Grant. Tell them the marshal needs army assistance to put down an armed insurrection led by Silas Blackwood. Go now." The deputy wheeled his horse and galloped away. For the rest of them, there was no time to wait for help. "Willow, you stay here with your father," the marshal commanded. "No," she said, her voice like steel. She pulled the revolver Adam had given her from her saddlebag. "This is my fight. They're coming for my family." She looked at the marshal, her eyes blazing. "The Morgans are my family." Garrett looked at this 18-year-old girl, covered in ash, holding a gun, and he saw the heart of a warrior. He gave a single sharp nod. "Stay behind me." They rode for the Morgan Ranch not as a posse, but as an army of 4, racing to head off a massacre. Willow's heart pounded with every hoofbeat. She wasn't just riding to save the man she loved. She was riding to save herself, to claim the future that had been stolen from her before she was even born. The quiet valley was about to erupt in a war that had been simmering for 20 years, and she was at the heart of the storm. The Morgan Ranch was under siege. Burroughs and a dozen of Blackwood's hired guns had surrounded the main house, using the outbuildings and fences for cover. Puffs of smoke from rifle fire dotted the landscape. Adam and his father were returning fire from the windows of the house, hopelessly outnumbered. Marshal Garrett's arrival was a thunderclap. He and his deputy opened fire from the ridge, their long-range rifles picking off 2 of Blackwood's men before they even knew what was happening. "It's the law!" someone shouted, and for a moment, the attackers were thrown into confusion. "Edgar, you and Willow get to the barn," Garrett yelled over the gunfire. "Give us covering fire from there. We'll pin them in a crossfire." Willow and her father slid from their horses and ran, low to the ground, the air alive with the whistle of bullets. They made it to the barn, the big wooden doors providing solid cover. From inside the house, Adam saw them. He saw Willow, her blue dress smeared with soot, holding a revolver, taking cover with her father. The sight of her, fighting for his home, for his family, shattered the last of his anger. What was a 20-year-old's secret compared to this woman's courage? "Willow!" he roared from the window. She heard him, her head snapping up. Their eyes met across the battlefield of the yard. In that single look, all the betrayal and anger was burned away, replaced by a desperate, fierce love. The battle raged. Garrett and his deputy kept up a steady, accurate fire from the ridge, while Willow and Edgar fired from the barn, forcing Burroughs's men to stay down. The crossfire was brutal. "We need to get to the house," Willow yelled to her father over the din. "They can't hold out forever." Edgar nodded, his face grim. The years of drink had been stripped away, leaving the determined man he once was. "On my signal," he said. "Run." He stood up, exposing himself, and fired 3 quick shots at the men pinned down behind a water trough. "Now!" he screamed. Willow ran. She ran faster than she'd ever run in her life, her heart in her throat, praying she wouldn't feel the slap of a bullet. She heard a cry from behind her. She risked a glance back and saw her father stumble and fall, a dark stain spreading across his chest. "No!" she screamed. But she couldn't stop. She had to keep going. She launched herself onto the porch and through the front door, which Adam ripped open for her. He pulled her inside, his arms wrapping around her in a desperate embrace. "I thought I'd lost you," he breathed into her hair. "My father," she sobbed. "He's been hit." Just then, the firing outside intensified. Burroughs was making a final desperate charge on the house. George Morgan appeared, his face streaked with gunpowder. "They're coming!" Suddenly a new sound cut through the chaos, a bugle call clear and sharp. On the ridge, a line of blue-coated soldiers appeared, the U.S. cavalry from Fort Grant. The deputy had made it. The fight was over. Blackwood's men threw down their guns and surrendered, Burroughs among them. Adam and Willow ran back outside. They found Edgar leaning against the barn, conscious but pale, his hand pressed to his side. The bullet had gone through, but it had missed anything vital. He was going to live. He looked up at his daughter, and then at the young man holding her. "I figured," he said, his voice weak but clear. "It was time I saved someone, instead of just needing to be saved myself." Later that day, as the marshal's men led the prisoners away, a black carriage arrived. Silas Blackwood stepped out, a look of utter disbelief on his face. He saw the cavalry, his captured men, the marshal waiting for him with handcuffs. "Garrett," he snarled, "you have no authority here." "I have a sworn confession from your man Burroughs," the marshal said, his voice like iron. "And the testimony of Edgar Wilson, who will attest that he saw you murder Jacob Morgan 20 years ago. You've been blackmailing him and the Morgan family ever since. Your reign is over, Blackwood." Blackwood looked at Willow, and the hatred in his eyes was pure poison. "You," he hissed, "the farmer's girl, you did this?" "Yes," she said, her voice clear and strong. Adam's hand was holding hers. "I did." As they led Blackwood away in chains, a strange quiet fell over the ranch. The war was over. The ghosts had been laid to rest. George Morgan walked over to Edgar, who was being tended to by a cavalry medic. The 2 old men looked at each other, the secret that had defined their lives now out in the open. "I'm sorry, George," Edgar said simply. "For everything." "So am I," George replied. "We let a secret poison us for too long. We should have faced it together." He extended his hand. "Truce?" "Truce," Edgar said, shaking it. 1 week later, Willow Wilson stood in the Copper Springs church. It wasn't the grand celebration they had planned, but something smaller, more meaningful. The guests were her family, The Morgans, her father, his arm in a sling but his eyes clear and sober, and Marshall Garrett, who had insisted on attending. She wore the beautiful satin dress, a symbol not of a hasty arrangement, but of a future earned through fire and blood. As she walked down the aisle toward Adam, she knew this was real. Their love wasn't built on a lie anymore. It had been tested, broken, and reforged in the heat of battle, and it was stronger than she could ever have imagined. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Adam's kiss was not just a promise, it was a victory. That evening, they stood on the porch of the main house, watching the sun set over a valley that was finally at peace. Her head rested on his shoulder, the star pendant he'd given her warm against her skin. "What now, Mrs. Morgan?" he asked, his voice soft. She thought about the journey that had brought her here. The desperation, the fear, the discovery of a strength she never knew she possessed. She thought about her father's redemption and the two families, once divided by a bloody secret, now united by a shared future. "Now," she said, a smile touching her lips, "we build a life so good, it honors the price that was paid for it." He tightened his arm around her, and together they watched the stars begin to appear in the vast Arizona sky. Each one a tiny spark of light in the darkness, each one a promise of a new day. Her father had tried to sell her for $500, but in the end, she'd inherited something far more valuable: the truth. And with it, she hadn't just saved a ranch, she'd saved them all. If you enjoyed this story of justice in the Old West, don't forget to like and subscribe, because there are always more secrets hidden in the shadows, just waiting for the right person to bring them into the light.